days. Into Sunday morning, again, a sunny start for many. Showers get going quite quickly. And once again, the showers will be focused towards the northwest of the country with drier conditions towards the southeast. Some heavier and more persistent rain on Monday, drying up again on Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, happy Friday to you. I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock. Now, cast your mind back to Monday. It was the start, wasn't it, of the government's Small Boats Week. Yes, they were saying they were going to sort it all out, and the first people boarded the Bibby Stockholm. Well, the government will be cringing now because the ending of the Small Boats Week isn't that great, because you literally couldn't make this up. The migrants that got on board at the start of the week are now off. Why? Well, because there is an outbreak of a bacteria, the type that can cause Legionnaire's disease. I mean, I shouldn't laugh because it is very serious, but I mean, the words pee up in a brewery spring to mind, if you ask me, and junior doctors are out on strike again. Couple of questions. Are they risking our lives by doing this? And how much now of these strikes are about political ideology as opposed to terms and conditions? And the TUC have proposed a wealth tax, they say, to try and pay for services. And get this, rather than just a vague notion of taxing the rich, they've come up with a proper plan, and I respect that. What I'm asking, though, is a simple question. Should the rich be forced to pay even more for services which, quite frankly, they probably barely even use at all? And kids, oh, I'm on my soapbox with this one, ladies and gents. There's a book, a children's book written about Princess Diana. Great story. Why, though, do they need to add in the fact that her husband cheated on her and she used to eat all these cakes and make herself sick and she had an eating disorder? Why, oh why, are we obsessed with removing the innocence of children? Why can we not just let kids be kids? What is going on? We've got it all to come and more, but before we get into it, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you and good evening. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The Home Secretary was warned that holding migrants on the Bibby Stockholm barge was a huge health and safety risk. The Fire Brigades Union says it wrote to Suella Braverman more than a week ago but hasn't received a response. All 39 migrants on the barge were removed this afternoon after Legionella bacteria was found in the water. The bacteria can cause a serious type of lung infection known as Legionnaire's disease. Meanwhile, the Home Office has confirmed 755 people crossed the English Channel in 14 small boats yesterday. That's the highest daily figure so far this year. As we reported yesterday, it brings the total number of people to have made the crossing to 100,000. That's since numbers were recorded in 2018. The RMT union has announced fresh strikes for around 20,000 of its members. RMT workers at 14 train operators will walk out on the 26th of August and the 2nd of September. It's part of their ongoing dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. The union says it's been left with little choice but to take further action, as it's seen no improved or revised offer from the rail delivery group. The Health Secretary says the latest 4-day strike by junior doctors, which started today, serves only to harm patients. Protesters have been gathering outside Downing Street this afternoon. It's the 5th time they've staged a walkout this year in their ongoing dispute over pay. The British Medical Association says it's been left with no choice. According to the NHS, almost 835,000 appointments have been postponed since the industrial action began in December. Chief Secretary to the Treasury, John Glenn, insists the 6% uplift given to junior doctors is fair and says the government won't take part in any more talks.
What we cannot have is an inflationary pay increase. Before we broke for the recess, we settled all the pay disputes based on the pay review bodies. And, for example, the teachers accepted the pay review body recommendation, as the government did, and are no longer striking. So I regret very much that the doctors have chosen to strike again. I totally recognise that this has a negative impact on patients' experience.
Surrey Police says the 3 people detectives want to speak to in connection with the murder of a 10-year-old girl in Woking left the UK on Wednesday. The girl was found dead in the early hours of yesterday morning after police were alerted to a concern for safety. Now, the case of an autistic girl arrested by police for making an alleged homophobic remark has prompted a complaint, a warning some viewers may find the following footage distressing. A video circulating on TikTok shows a 16-year-old autistic girl being detained by 7 officers outside her home in Leeds. It's understood she told her mother that one of the police officers looked like her grandmother, who's a lesbian. The teenager was arrested on suspicion of a homophobic public order offence. West Yorkshire Police says the video provides a very limited snapshot of the incident. A US judge has warned Donald Trump not to make inflammatory statements about the 2020 election case. The federal judge gave the former US president leeway to publicly share some non-sensitive evidence that will be used in his trial on charges of plotting to overturn the 2020 presidential election. But the judge also since made the protective order warning. Trump's attorneys argue the scope of the order is too broad and affects his free speech rights. The death toll from wildfires in Hawaii has risen to at least 55 as it grapples with the worst natural disaster in the state's history. The blazes have reduced much of the resort city of Lahaina to smouldering ruins. It's one of 3 major fires still ravaging the island of Maui. Entire neighbourhoods have been burnt to the ground as dry conditions and strong winds complicate efforts to bring the fires under control. And finally, the King has reshuffled military appointments for working members of the royal family as the anniversary of the late Queen's death nears. King Charles takes over 8 of his mother's former honorary posts himself. The reshuffle sees Prince William take command of Harry's old army unit as Colonel-in-Chief of the Army Air Corps. The Princess of Wales has been given 3 new roles, one of which is Commodore-in-Chief of the Fleet Air Arm. That's a title previously held by Prince Andrew. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by simply saying, play GB News. Now it's over to Michelle.
Thanks for that, Tatiana. I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, a face that I've not seen for a while, so I welcome back warmly Baroness Claire Fox, the Director of the Academy of Ideas, and Paul Embry, a firefighter and trade unionist. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Obviously, the ongoing conversation about your facial hair never goes anywhere. Whenever we see you, it's a very hot topic of conversation. It divides opinion, Claire, about whether or not facial hair is a good thing for Paul.
We should do a poll.
Not.
We should do a GB viewers poll.
We should. Never mind the strikes, never mind the migrant crisis, never mind anything, quite
let's
frankly.
Let's get to what really matters.
The bolts of it, facial hair or not. Do you know, I don't know if we're allowed to really be like that in a post-Me Too environment.
Well, who cares?
I don't know. Anyway,
Look who's inviting it in, right?
Yeah, this is GB News. We say what we think.
He knows that he gets loads of compliments, that's why. Anyway, you know the drill, don't you, on Dewbs & Co. Get in touch with your thoughts tonight on all the topics, particularly the big one of the day, which is Paul's beard. gbviews@gbnews.com is how you reach me, or you can tweet me at GB News. Now, the start of the week, it was all about, wasn't it, the government's small boat week. Lots of people, well, I say lots, I don't really mean lots at all. I mean about 15 people actually boarding the Bibby Stockholm. You'll remember at the start of the week. Well, guess what? We're ending the week, and I suspect that Suella Braverman will not be a happy individual, because if you haven't seen the news already, you better steady yourself on your feet, because you won't believe this. You literally could not make it up. Because now you've got these people on this barge, the Bibby Stockholm, they've now been taken off said barge because bacteria that can go on to cause Legionnaire's disease has been found on board. It's basically been found within the water supply of the barge, so not the broader area, the actual barge itself. Now, you are a firefighter, Paul. There's a lot of conversation here about whether or not this board, I mean, it gets called like a floating Alcatraz, inhumane, all the rest of it. The Fire Brigade Union, we just heard as well in the headlines there, they've been speaking out saying that the checks and balances that you guys do, you know, they haven't had an adequate response from. So, firstly, I mean, we'll come on to the actual laughable farce that is putting them on and taking them off in a minute, but just help people understand. The Fire Brigade, when it comes to, like, accommodation and things like the Bibby Stockholm, just simplify, because it might be quite complicated, but just for, you know, as quick as you can, just give us an overview about the involvement from the Fire Brigade in the first place.
So, I mean, fire safety, first of all, is quite a complex area of legislation, and we've seen that with some of the stuff that's come out of the Grenfell Tower inquiry. But on something like this, fire safety inspecting officers would be going aboard the barge, and they would be making a number of checks. They would be looking at things like, is there an adequate means of escape in the event of a fire? They would be checking to make sure there's a requisite number of fire extinguishers. They would be checking fire doors and things like that. And if they've come to the view, and I do understand, and the union has said that, you know, some experts have been aboard and have come to the view that actually there are safety concerns, then personally, you know, I'm inclined to believe that, as you would expect.
But how does it work then? So if those guys go on board and say, right, look, we've got a concern about this, you know, can the government say, well, that's fascinating, but we're going to proceed anyway? Or is there some kind of law that says if the fire brigade service have said you can't, you know, there's a concern, then you have to press pause? How does it work?
Oh, well, no, if there's an alleged fire risk, then it's not for government to intervene in a particular individual matter where the local fire and rescue service has flagged up an alleged fire risk. That's for, you know, it would be for the people who operate the barge, it would be for the local fire service and managers in the local fire service to address those issues. I would not expect on something like that the Home Secretary necessarily to sort of micromanage the situation.
Right.
But nonetheless, if the union is concerned that things are not being acted upon, that the safety concerns are not being acted upon, I don't think the union is necessarily wrong to flag it up and to say that the Home Secretary should take a stance on it.
Right, well, there you go. So we've heard about the fire thing, so I'll come back to you on the broader migrant point. But Claire, your thoughts on this whole debacle with the Bibi Stockholm? You're on, you're off.
Well, I think there's a number of different things. The arguments against putting people on the barge have taken the form of a very morally charged, emotional, it's like Alcatraz, they're being badly treated, which I think has been a politicisation of an already difficult situation, to be frank, because by all accounts there was nothing wrong with the barge's facilities. It's not that you would recommend that people go on holiday there. No one is saying it's beautiful. This latest debacle is actually, there is a kind of problem of a kind of bureaucratic nature, which is that they checked the water on the 25th of July. They then didn't get the results till the day they were due back on.
Right.
And then they didn't wait for and then the Home Office weren't told that there was a danger with the water until today, right? So that's a bit of a mess. But I think that politically we all know that the overall feeling is no matter what anyone tries to do to deal with the problem of illegal migration and the small boats, there will be something gets in the way. So from a public's point of view, it's tearing your hair out. And as you said, you couldn't make it up. Suella Brodman, I mean, it's like, this is just this is actually a genuine practical problem, which they have to deal with. I mean, they can't let people get Legionnaires' disease.
Of course.
But the whole thing has not felt like that because there's been legal barriers. As you noted, only 15 people went on instead of the 50 originally. We've heard all of the stories. And so I think that my overall feeling is it's never going to solve the asylum problem. It's all, you know, the asylum-seeking, illegal migration, small boats, whichever way you want to label it, problem by having a load of barges. But just this one barge is now in the doldrums. And from the point of view of the public, it's like nothing will ever be done to solve this
But if
issue.
I was Suella Braverman, Paul, I would be going absolutely ballistic at my team, whoever is responsible for, you know, the checks and balances, because, you know, the optics of this situation, like the optics now, this thing is out of control. I don't care what anyone says. I don't understand how anyone can get a grip of this right now if you're not prepared to either push the boats back and actually stop people coming in here in the first place, or get yourself out of the legal framework that allows all of these ongoing wrangles. If you're not prepared to do those two things, which the Tories don't seem to do, then I don't know how you're going to get a grip of that. So if you're not going to get a grip of it, the optics matter. So how on earth they can have this situation where you've shoved these people on that barge, knowing the eyes of the country are watching you and willing you to fail, how can you get it so wrong?
Well, I mean, as Claire said, it kind of adds to the whole sense of shambles around the whole of immigration policy. You know, we've seen the Rwanda thing that didn't take off, no pun intended. We've now seen this latest initiative and it's not going to work. We've seen other initiatives where lawyers have intervened and stopped them from happening. Now, we can all have individual debates about whether we think particular initiatives are good, bad, indifferent, whether we think they're going to work, whether they're not going to work, whether they're a waste of money, whether they're a good use of taxpayers' money. But the key thing for me is for as long as this kind of shambles in terms of immigration policy continues, and what it does is it undermines people's faith in the democratic mechanism.
Right.
Because if for many, many years now, so many millions of people have been saying, look, I'm pro-immigration, which I think most people broadly are, but I'm not pro unregulated, unmanaged immigration, and I'm not comfortable with the numbers coming in, and I want something done about it. And they vote that way in general elections, as I think they did in 2019.
A lot of people watching, by the way, that say that they're not in favour of immigration.
OK, well, some may say that, but I think that's broadly the one that I set out is broadly the position, and they voted unquestionably for an enter-free movement in the referendum in 2016. And time and again, they see their politicians lining up saying, yes, we listen to you, yes, we've heard your concerns, yes, we know we have to act upon it, yes, we know we have to get numbers down. And then year on year, actually numbers don't come down, and in some cases numbers are still going up to astronomical levels. Then what people do is they say, well, what is the point of me going to the ballot box and voting for stuff if politicians just pay lip service to me and just ignore me and, you know, treat me as, you know, the basket of deplorables, as Hillary Clinton said in America? And the danger then, actually, is people then turn to populism and people turn to more, you know, nefarious groups who pick up on their concerns, as the BNP did in this country in the sort of 2000s. And that's, I think, and I don't think politicians are alive to this, that is the sort of situation that they're stoking up by continually failing. And, you know, Suella Braverman, OK, you know, she says the right things from time to time. People are not interested in fine words anymore on this issue. They actually want the issue addressed. And it strikes me that nobody has got any sort of idea in terms of how to address it.
Do you agree with any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I actually, it was interesting that you said a lot of people are messaging in saying I'm opposed to immigration, because I think that Paul's absolutely right that what's happened is, because of the absolute debacle and the refusal or the apparent inability of politicians to resolve this or get on top of it, to act with a sense of urgency, to actually behave not just with headlines or with fancy legislation, but to just deal with it. And you, by the way, it's not beyond... I'm not saying I know what to do, but they can do something.
I've got an idea, right?
But I do think... I just wanted to say one thing. I do think now what's happened is people who were more liberal about immigration, full stop, but wanted to clamp down on illegal immigration, are now beginning to say even the term immigration's getting on my nerves, right? And maybe the problem is immigration per se.
Well, let me ask you this, because you are, in part, a lawmaker in your role in the Lords, right? What I can't comprehend, why have the government of this country not said, right, this is now an emergency situation? So the way that COVID was this an emergency declaration, and then they shoehorned all of these different law changes and all these different things in on the basis of a national emergency. Why is this not being picked up? The fact that you've lost, let's face it, you've lost control. I don't even want to talk about losing, it's gone. You've lost control. This is now putting pressure on services up and down the country. You don't know who half these people are, so you've got no idea whether or not you've got a massive national security risk on your hands. I would argue that you probably do. So to me, this is now a national emergency. Why aren't the lawmakers seeing it like that?
Because there's no will to. You've just hit the nail on the head. I mean, that was my frustration with the Rwanda bill, right, which is now an act, which is that I was trying to defend the right of the government to take control of the borders, but the problem was it was a stupid piece of legislation that didn't do exactly what you've just said, because it was very limited. And one of the things that I noticed was that all of the front bench and the Conservative people who were supporting the bill would do things like saying, no, it won't do that, and we are complying with this international treaty, and don't worry, we are going... So, actually, they conceded a lot of the territory. They didn't say, this has actually got to a point where we're prepared to really be radical, right, and do something that where we don't try and say it does fit into the 1951, UN, but they constantly tried to say, no, we're trying to do it within the terms of. So I think that you're spot on in terms of saying, but I think this is true of a lot of things, by the way. When you have a genuine national problem, you can mobilise the population to say, we will solve this. Say, for example, you have it around building houses or anything else, right? Creating services. And they could say, you can come up with extraordinary legislation to deal with this, to actually act as though you're going to solve it. And I think that the fact that there is still so much slowness in processing people is a disaster.
Well, there you go. Where there is a will, there is clearly a way. So why is there not that will? Speaking of things that are broken, the NHS, of course, up there at the top of the list too. Junior doctors now out on strike again. A couple of questions for you to ponder. One, do you think that doctors should be able to strike in the first place? And number two, do you support them? Do you think that they do deserve a 35% pay? And number three, do you reckon this is all getting a little bit political now? Do you think there's some kind of ideology at play that goes beyond terms, conditions and pay? Your thoughts?
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, till 7, Baroness Claire Foxer? I was going to call you Fox today. That was a combination.
Foxy, they used to call me at school.
That was a combination of the word fox and director. I blended it together there. Anyway, director of the Academy of Ideas, and Paul Embry, a firefighter and trade unionist, alongside me too. Now, one of the big stories today, we know that the NHS is in an absolute mess now. About 7.6 million of us on the waiting list. Absolute shambles and a disgrace. Notwithstanding it, though, the junior doctors have gone out on strike again today, 4 days this time. We know the details by now, don't we? They are wanting pay restoration back to 2008. That would be a whopping 35% pay rise. Now, the junior doctors have been given 6% plus £1,250, which works out on average about 9%. So I'm asking you tonight a couple of questions. Should doctors be able to go out on strike like this? Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, he's saying that they are now risking lives. And I also want to get into the fact that I think there's a bit of a political element to these strikes. Do you at home? All of your thoughts coming in on that. But also joining me tonight for this debate, a registered nurse and writer, Sarah Jane Palmer. Hello and welcome. Thanks for squeezing in. We like that. I'll start with you because you are a registered nurse and NHS is in a mess. I've just been describing it. I won't go back over it. So do you actually think that doctors, nurses, etc. should be able to go on strike?
I think it's morally wrong. I can't see how that there could be a justification for it, because even though it's important that doctors and nurses are paid fairly, but then again, I think the health of your patient comes first. And I think it would cause unnecessary suffering by going on strike. You're abandoning your patients, you're causing the waiting lists already at an all-time high of 7 million to increase even more, and that causes long-term damage as well down the line in a couple of years.
But they would say, a junior doctor would turn around and say, well, yeah, you know, I might be putting my patient at harm, but the patient could be a lot more harm if I decide that I can't afford to live in this role and off I go.
They say that, yeah, but I mean, to attract people by having a more lucrative salary, you might attract people into the job, but it doesn't keep them. Staff retention relies on, I think, cultural issues to be resolved. So I think currently there's quite a bad issue with bullying in the NHS, and there's other issues that need to be resolved. And I don't think that can just be resolved through pay alone.
Well, Paul, you are a staunch trade unionist. Sarah Jane, they're saying it's morally wrong for doctors, etc., to go on strike. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't. I mean, I've been in a position as an emergency service worker where I've voted for strike action and I've taken strike action.
He's a firefighter, by the way.
And it's never less than a genuinely agonising decision for anybody in that position to have to make. And you do wrestle with your conscience. And, you know, trust me, people in that position, and I'm sure junior doctors would only decide to take strike action if they feel it's a last resort and if they feel they've got a legitimate cause.
A last resort? I think this is their 5th time or something. How many times is it a last resort?
The point that I'm making is taking strike action in the first place is a last resort. If you've made your case, if you feel that, you know, you haven't been able to persuade your employer as a result of negotiations, sometimes you've got that final weapon and sometimes you have to use it. And the problem is this: if you were to take away that weapon, then imagine what governments and employers would do then. I mean,
I don't like the word weapon. We're talking, Claire, we're talking about, like, he's sitting there saying, oh, if you take this weapon... These are people's lives, life and death situation. Weapons, really?
No, but the right to strike is a very important civil liberty, and I'm not going to throw that over for anyone. I mean, we have to be able to withdraw our labour, whatever job we do. It doesn't mean that I support necessarily each and every strike that happens, but you asked... should it be, as it were, banned? Should they be allowed to?
Police, for example, they can't go on strike. Some of the armed forces, the prison officers. Do you think that they should be able to go on strike?
Well, first of all, I don't necessarily agree with the ban on the right to strike for those forces, but what I am saying is I don't want it expanding. And where would you draw the line? Because you could draw the line on every single public service worker would say, oh, well, I have a life in a hand like the fire services, we've said. But listen, just to go on to the particular issue, I mean... I think that one of the problems here is that most of us perceive that the problems of the NHS are not just to do with junior doctors, right? The government trying to say it's junior doctors are putting lives at risk, I think is really not on, because at the moment, the NHS is in a complete mess, and I hold a wide range of people responsible for that. We've just talked about what you would do in a serious situation. The waiting lists on non-strike days, largely supported, by the way, largely created in the modern period by the lockdown measures, which the government went for, the opposition went for, and I'm afraid the health unions went for. Those things, I think, are problematic, do need to be tackled, need to be at least accepted, and then we need to act as though there's something crucial going on. But the individual doctors are not trying to kill people off. That's a horrible accusation.
The fact is, though, the waiting lists are being made worse by the strikes. So you're quite right to mention that the waiting lists require attention, but the fact is the junior doctors are genuinely making it worse by striking. And I think it's ridiculous to ask for 35%. Do you think that's reasonable?
I think that look, I'm not in that union. What you demand as an increase in your pay rise, or what your particular union demands...
You must have a view on it. They're asking for 35%.
I can understand that what they're saying is we haven't been paid fairly for many a year and we're going to demand it. But I'm saying I would actually say that there are things that could change in the health service that would make it more efficient, and I would like workers in the health service to contribute to changing working conditions. But I do support the right to strike for an increase in wages. Very important to defend.
Let me say, something caught my ears this morning, so it did, and I'm going to play it for you in a couple of seconds, because this was on the Today programme on the BBC, and it was a conversation there about these strikes, and this is Dr Robert Lawrenson. He is the co-chair of the Junior Doctors Committee at the BMA, and they were talking about the situation in Scotland versus the situation in England. So just have a little listen.
Absolutely, you would not accept the kind of deal that your Scottish members are thinking of accepting?
No, because the governments are very different. So the Scottish government, there's a basis to work forwards and have a relationship and a working relationship to negotiate in the future. The government that we have today are hell-bent on using the rigged independent pay review bodies to suppress our pay.
If I may say so, it sounds very, to a patient who is not able to go to hospital today, has had something cancelled, who's desperately worried, possibly in pain, it really does sound ideological, the reasons why you won't do the kind of deal with the government, with the Westminster government, that they seem to be willing to do in Scotland.
So I think what's ideological is the government cutting our pay for 15 consecutive years.
See, I listened to that, and you can listen to it yourself back if you want to. It's a Today programme, Radio 4, it was this morning. And that really pricked my ears up, because I thought there is an element of this, in my view, Paul, where it's not just about pay and conditions, it's not just about terms and conditions, it's about the fact that you don't like the Tories. And I feel that what's going on now will strike and strike and strike and strike, will just kill time to make sure that actually by the time we get to the next general election, Rishi Sunak is battered by the NHS.
No, hold on a second, Michelle. Look, we're not living in the 1970s where a trade union leader could say everybody out and everybody had to down tools and walk out of the door. To get strike action off the ground today, unions have to go through very complex procedures. It takes several weeks, and they have to have a democratic secret ballot of their membership. The idea that junior doctors have all woken up one morning and decided we hate the Tories, we're going to take strike action.
Do you think 35% restoration is realistic?
Well, first of all, that represents the amount that their real wages have fallen off a cliff since the global financial crisis. And it's an opening gambit. I mean, of course they're not going to get that, and they're not expecting to get that.
But they're saying they won't go to the table. So in Scotland, they've got something like 12 points something. The BMA are insisting this. And I don't mean to be rude, by the way, but when I look some of these junior doctors up, they're very young people. I respect the work that they do, but they went into this profession way post-2008, knowing the wages that were on offer at that point in time. So if you ask me, I think it's a bit rich to now sit there and say, you know what, I've joined this profession, but now I joined accepting the T's and C's and pay as it was, but now I'm going to down tools unless you give me the pay that it should have been all these years ago. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
Michelle, we're in a cost of living crisis as well. I mean, when they joined, they didn't know there was going to be a cost of living crisis.
We're in a cost of living crisis, and that means we, as a channel, have got to pay the bills. With that in mind, let's have a look at the weather.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Greg Dewhurst, and looking at the weekend, be summarised by sunshine and scattered showers, particularly heavy on Saturday. And looking at the bigger picture, we can see why this area of low pressure moves in for the weekend, increasing the wind strengths, increasing the risk of showers across the north and the west in particular. Out there through the rest of Friday evening, not too bad. There'll be some clear spells before dusk, and then overnight we'll see some outbreaks of rain pushing in across parts of Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, which could be heavy at times. Temperatures generally a little lower than recent nights, so a little more comfortable for sleeping, but still 14 or 15 for many to start Saturday morning. Better the sunshine first thing across eastern parts of England, northeast Scotland. But these bands of rain slowly push their way eastwards through the day as the area of low pressure pushes in from the Atlantic. Some of this rain could be heavy and perhaps thundery at times across northern England, but there will be some sunny spells in between, and that will lift temperatures to around 23 degrees towards the southeast. Breezier conditions towards the northwest here, 20 or 21 as a maximum temperature. Into Sunday, low pressure still in charge. The winds do ease, and there will be less showers around, but fairly cloudy picture. Some bright or sunny spells, a scattering of showers, and temperatures once again reaching the high teens to low 20s. Into the beginning of next week, it stays unsettled. Further rain on Monday, but signs of something drier and brighter by Tuesday.
That warm feeling inside. From boxed boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, there you go. Lots of you guys getting in touch about the doctors' strike. Mark says the BMA should be thoroughly ashamed of themselves. They are making ridiculous demands, and it's time for it to stop. Michael says the lady in the studio at the moment, Sarah Jane Parker, I like her very much, and I agree with her comments. Sarah Jane Parker there was saying that she is a nurse and she thinks it is immoral for people to go on strike. Claire Fox, however, they're saying absolutely not. You cannot and should not remove anybody's right to strike, quite frankly. What would you make to that? And what do you think to my observation that I do now think that we've got to a point where I think that things are now borderline political? And yes, of course, I want our doctors and our nurses and all the rest of everyone in the NHS to be paid fairly. Let me know your thoughts on all of that, GBViews at gbnews.com. Do not go anywhere. I want to talk to you about wealth taxes, and I also want to ask, why are we obsessed with removing innocence from our children?
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. Baroness Claire Fox alongside me, as is Paul Embry. Let's talk wealth tax, shall we? It's an issue which divides many of us, and it's a simple question. Do you think those wealthiest in society should pay even more when it comes to propping up things like public services? A modest wealth tax, it says modest in quotes and it makes me chuckle. Anyway, the top 140,000 people in this country, apparently this is a suggestion by the TUC, TUC. They reckon that a one-off wealth tax of 1.7% on those that have assets of above £3 million, and then you'd raise it to 3.5% if you've got more than 10 million in assets, and then you would end up with about £10.4 billion extra money. Paul Embry, your thoughts?
Completely support it. It's high time we did it. I think our nation is disfigured by hideous wealth and income inequality. And I think this is one measure that can address that. We've got millions of ordinary families at the moment struggling to make ends meet, struggling to pay their mortgages and their energy bills. I think the pandemic widened inequality in this country. Isn't it funny how, at the same time as we're seeing ordinary people suffering from the cost of living crisis, we're still seeing directors' pay go up. We're still seeing some of our corporations registering record profits. We're still seeing city bonuses increase handsomely. So I think there's a compelling argument to say that, you know, to the purpose of trying to reduce the gap between rich and poor, and also to the purpose of trying to help millions of ordinary families through the cost of living crisis, yes, we should levy a wealth tax.
Thank goodness I disagree with Paul. It's about time now.
Yeah.
I absolutely disagree on that. I actually think that this becomes a diversion from growing the economy. It's always the same. It's like tax the rich. Sounds great. Actually, I think there's a real danger that you end up just bashing the rich. What you really need to do is to have a bigger cake, to use that analogy, right? You don't just kind of divide it differently. And what actually needs to happen is that we invest more, innovate, have an industrial strategy, grow the economy, and I'm afraid that in order to do that, you're also going to have some rich people around that you're going to want to involve in that process as well as anyone else. So for me, it just it's a kind of headline without it really producing much, and you can say, well, it creates 10 billion, I think the TUC is saying. But actually, relatively speaking, that's not that much. What I'd much rather see is billions invested in new industries, in jobs, in infrastructure.
I think you can do both, though, Claire. I think you can say on the one hand, look, actually, we do need to grow the economy. We need to be more competitive. We need to invest more. We need to improve productivity.
Who's going to do the investment? If what you've actually done is got the people that have got the money to invest, you've taxed them to the point where they've gone, do you know what?
But that's the point, Michelle. We're not taxing them to the point. We're not taxing them to the point where they say, do you know what? You know, I'm going to up sticks and go abroad. They always say that.
Loads of people in Norway did. So Norway introduced a wealth tax of 1.1%, and loads of super wealthy people left.
The super rich, yeah, but you could look at countries like Spain where a wealth tax actually worked. But people always do that. If they're going to be taxed more, then people at the top who think that they've got a bit of leverage over government, they've got lots of money, they've got lots of power and influence, they say, yeah, you dare do that to me, I'm going to be going abroad. In most cases, they don't. And why don't we criticise those people for holding the country to ransom in the way that, you know, we've just heard junior doctors criticised for holding the country to ransom? I think the rich who threaten to leave are holding the country to ransom as much. Look, the truth is, we've got something like the poorer half of our country, the poorest 50% of our country, owns just 9% of the wealth. Countries do not succeed economically or socially if there are vast disparities in wealth between rich and poor.
Pay something like 28% of all the income tax. The top 10% pay something like 60%.
Pound for pound, of course, they will pay more than a person on low earnings. But actually, often, as a proportion of their income, they actually pay less than the average punter in the street.
But it's just that this is the TUC saying they want to launch a national conversation. I just think if you're launching a national conversation, don't do it on this. It's the most shallow kind of argument about what you can do to improve the economic plight of people who haven't got any money. And I do think that the way that they're going to get money is that we actually create a stronger economy. And at the moment, there are barriers to the creation of that strong economy, and it can be net zero, it can be all sorts of regulatory barriers. There's, I'm afraid, trade unions involved in not enhancing economic growth because they go along with a lot of barriers to that.
On that basis, Claire, would you oppose, for example, a windfall tax on the banks, which are earning huge excess profits at the moment as a result of the interest rate rises? I think there's a compelling argument for that. But on the basis of your argument, you would oppose that as well?
I'm not particularly keen on a windfall tax. What I would like is the banks to be more concerned with investment and in money and ensuring that money is invested well instead of, as we know, playing politics, which is what they're doing at the moment. So for me, There's a danger here. I mean, you'll be familiar, Paul. We've been hearing these arguments for 20 years, right? Or 30 years or 40 years. It lacks imagination. It's not very ambitious.
Do you know, I always say about this national conversation, if you want to start a national conversation, why don't you create a national conversation about a voluntary tax code? Such a thing exists already, but actually all these people that do desperately want to pay more tax than they have to, off you go then. I always say that. Go on, you can overpay to HMRC now if you are so inclined to do so. Listen, I've got a great topic coming up for you, so I'm going to cut this one short because I'm asking you after the break, why are we so desperately intent to remove the innocence from our children? It's happening everywhere you look now. Why? You tell me.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry till 7 alongside me, Baroness Claire Fox and Paul Embry. Let's get straight into our final topic because it's something that we all are very passionate about, and the question is simple. Why do we keep removing the innocence away from our children? It's happening everywhere. But the thing that caught my eye today was a book. It's a children's book all about Princess Diana. And it goes on. I mean, when you actually look at this book, it's the Little People Big Dream series. You might be familiar with it. But in this book, and I'll try and get it up on the screen to show you, it talks about Princess Diana. Yeah, great. But then it goes on to say that, long story short, her husband was having an affair and she developed this eating disorder called bulimia. She's going on about whenever she felt alone, she basically ate all of the cakes and then she made herself sick. Claire, why can't a child just learn about a princess? Why do we have to involve the cheating husband and the bulimia? What's going on in society?
I mean, the worst thing about this is that reading when you're a kid can be the device through which
Oh, and
you can
cheers, by the way.
escape.
Dewberry Tackles open. I forgot that bit.
Excuse me,
Sorry, I
I'm like being all earnest and serious.
Oh,
and now
sorry,
I've got to
I
cheers.
apologise, sorry.
I'm saying, when you're
As
a
you were.
child, reading a book can be the absolutely brilliant thing where your imagination is fired up. You can go to, fantasy lands. All of the ways that we have children's literature is to allow them to develop their thinking skills. This is not about dreaming. This is nightmare land. And I'm afraid that a lot of children's books, literature, are now being used as kind of lessons in the worst kind of pessimism. I mean, goodness knows, if anything's going to make you body conscious when you're a little girl, right, is dreaming of, if I eat the wrong food, I might end up with bulimia.
Yeah.
I want people to want to grow up to be princesses, even though it's a daft thing, because it's something to aspire to. Or they can want to grow up to be a firefighter. Don't care what it is. But what you don't want is to problematise everything. And I think that this is enough to make young people overly preoccupied with the problems they're going to face. And it's also a politicised intervention, because we know that this is happening around the gender-sex issue, which we don't have to go on about. But it is in which political messages from adults to children are being used in an indoctrinating way, rather than the great literature that could really inspire them to want to be all sorts of things and give them a bit of joy and pleasure.
Just be happy.
Joy and pleasure.
Escapism. Paul?
Well, I read my kids The Famous Five when they were young, and to think about it, I mean, that is an absolute world away from some of the stuff that, kids read today, contemporary stuff. And I don't think that change has necessarily been all for the better. I mean, we have to avoid the pitfall of saying, everything's terrible today, everything was much better when we were kids. But I do feel that we are stealing the innocence of kids with stuff like this. It's almost like we want to bring them into the grown-up world and burden them with the problems that grown-ups have, which are actually, grown-up issues, and I don't think kids should necessarily be sharing in. And I think you can give kids too much info on stuff like this. You almost, and it's the law of unintended consequences, isn't it?
Absolutely,
where you almost signpost them to these conditions, and the whole thing becomes a bit self-fulfilling, and kids, by learning about things like this, suddenly think, oh, have I got bulimia? And we've seen a similar thing, I think, with the whole kind of mental health industry over recent years. Look, there are some people in society who have serious clinical mental health conditions, and they need compassion and they need treatment. Of course they do. But I'm concerned that actually it's almost for some people become a bit of a fashion accessory, where we've become so obsessed with telling people, check your mental health, and actually ordinary everyday human emotions like grief and sadness and disappointment, and your relationship's broken up, so you're distraught about that, are actually being categorised as mental health conditions. And in doing that, I think we're actually taking the resilience away from people, and we're saying to kids, you don't have the capacity to deal with this because you've got a medical condition, so go and get treatment. I think that's a real danger in society.
One of the things, Paul, that you've just said that's really right, I mean, I kind of wrote about this in my book on free speech, where I was trying to understand Generation Snowflake. Because one of the things that really dawned on me was, why would kids in a primary school be going around saying, I've got anxiety, I've got trauma? Like they're 7 or 6, 7, right? And they're using the language of the therapeutic industry. And what you know is that not that they might not be a bit fed up, but they've developed that language because they haven't learnt it from each other. They've learnt it from adults. And the problem then is they then start to see the childhood woes of, falling over or being called names or falling out with your mate or whatever, through the prism of this language of mental ill health. Well, and that trivialises real serious mental illness.
Well, I tweeted a few weeks ago, the Princess of Wales visited, I think it was a primary school.
Yeah.
And obviously we know that William and Catherine are pretty big on the whole mental health issue. And she actually said to the kids, make sure you check your mental health regularly, make sure you check your friends. And you kind of think, do you really want 8, 9-year-olds going around to each other every day and saying, is your mental health OK? Are you feeling anxious? Are you OK? I mean, for goodness sake, what that does actually is tell the kids you are so vulnerable and there's every chance that this disease is going to get you. Absolutely. So you need to be checking yourself the whole time. And if you think there's any signs of it, you need to be going to a counsellor.
Which is no wonder.
That's not what we should be telling our kids.
It's no wonder then at 16, 17, 18 that they say, I'm going to get a post-traumatic stress disorder if I read that novel, or if I get that, hear that speaker speak.
But I cannot help but wonder and ponder who and what is driving this, because children are children for such a few short years, and that is your opportunity. I would say it's your only opportunity in life to be truly free of worry, as long as your parents and those around you protect you from it, because there will be worries, there will be woes, there might be money troubles, there might be whatever. But to me, a job of a parent is to shelter and shield. And when that child becomes an adult or a teenager, then you know what? The problems of life will come at you and all the rest of it. But for now, leave children. Stop over-sexualising them. Stop putting makeup on them. Stop sticking them in bikinis. Stop doing all these weird things and exposing them. Let them be kids.
The people who do it, Michelle, are people who have a hyper-progressive worldview, who have got high-status opinions and think they are so right, then it's natural for them to impart those opinions every day onto the kids.
But they also don't believe, they don't trust parents to rear their kids. And so you have this educational and publishing phenomena of saying they'll tell them the wrong thing, we'll teach
Michael
them the right
agrees
way.
with us, and he says as well, stop stealing the innocence, let children grow. Paddy says it's brainwashing of children, if you ask me. Talking about the wealth tax, Jay says wealth in the UK is now seen as something dirty. Samantha says it's theft, pure and simple. Liz says she's loved the show, loves the panel. I've enjoyed it too, thank you. Thank you as well for your company. Have a great weekend, and I will see you tomorrow. Night-night.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Greg Dewhurst, and looking at the weekend, be summarised by sunshine and scattered showers, particularly heavy on Saturday. And looking at the bigger picture, we can see why this area of low pressure moves in for the weekend, increasing the wind strengths, increasing the risk of showers across the north and the west in particular. Out there through the rest of Friday evening, not too bad. There'll be some clear spells before dusk, and then overnight we'll see some outbreaks of rain pushing in across parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, which could be heavy at times. Temperatures generally a little lower than recent nights, so a little more comfortable for sleeping, but still 14 or 15 for many to start Saturday morning. Better the sunshine first thing across eastern parts of England, northeast Scotland. But these bands of rain slowly push their way eastwards through the day as the area of low pressure pushes in from the Atlantic. Some of this rain could be heavy and perhaps thundery at times across northern England, but there will be some sunny spells in between, and that will lift temperatures to around 23 degrees towards the southeast. Breezier conditions towards the northwest here, 20 or 21 as a maximum temperature. Into Sunday, low pressure still in charge. The winds do ease and there will be less showers around, but fairly cloudy picture. Some bright or sunny spells, a scattering of showers, and temperatures once again reaching the high teens to low 20s. Into the beginning of next week, it stays unsettled. Further rain on Monday, but signs of something drier and brighter by Tuesday.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So tonight, I'm going to be joined by Simon Dunchuk, who's the former Labour MP for Rochdale. We've also got the Deputy Leader of the Conservatives on the London Assembly, Emma Best. Got GB News presenter Charlie Peters, the Conservative councillor for Windsor, Lars Swan. Also got Spitting Image legend Steve Nallon, and former cabbie and famed Towie mum Claire Brockett. And talking about cabbie drivers, we've also got cab driver Gary Fisher. But first, your latest news headlines.
Good evening, I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The Home Secretary was warned that holding migrants on the Bibby Stockholm barge was a huge health and safety risk. The Fire Brigades Union says it wrote to Suella Braverman more than a week ago but hasn't received a response. All 39 migrants on the barge were removed this afternoon after Legionella bacteria was found in the water. The bacteria can cause a serious type of lung infection known as Legionnaire's disease. Meanwhile, the Home Office has confirmed 755 people crossed the English Channel in 14 small boats yesterday. That's the highest daily figure so far this year. As we reported yesterday, it brings the total number of people to have made the crossing to 100,000. That's since numbers were recorded in 2018. The RMT union has announced fresh strikes for around 20,000 of its members. RMT workers at 14 train operators will walk out on August the 26th and September the 2nd. It's part of their ongoing dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. The union says it's been left with little choice but to take further action as it's seen no improved or revised offer from the rail delivery group. The Health Secretary says the latest 4-day strike by junior